This is The Public Interest. I'm Malika Ramsey. Thank you very much for joining us this week. Of course, with me is leader of the People's National Congress Reform and leader of the opposition, Brigadier, the Honorable David Granger. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Malika.
Viewers would be aware by now that the last time the Brigadier and I met, we were discussing the President, that's President Donald Ramotar's address to the nation on Tuesday, the 4th of November 2014, where a Partnership for National Unity felt in that address that he did threaten the nation and, of course, the citizens of our country. However, on Monday, the 10th of November 2014, President Donald Ramotar made good on that threat, where he had said that he would have either prorogued or dissolved the parliament, and he did prorogue the parliament. Now, Brigadier Granger, your partnership would have already made several statements against this move by the administration. But what really are some of the serious implications of such a move by Mr. Donald Ramotar and his government?
Thank you, Malika. The most serious implication, of course, is that in one fell swoop, the President has been able to silence the National Assembly. Now, this is the forum, the highest lawmaking body in the country, and citizens went out to vote on the 28th of November 2011, 3 years ago, and they gave the APNU and the AFC a majority. Now, the President, with the stroke of a pen, literally, has prevented the representatives of this entire nation from legally or lawfully meeting, deliberating on matters of state, and passing laws. It is like a coup d'etat. He seized complete power for the executive, and that is the implication, that he has smothered democracy, albeit temporarily, but he has smothered democracy.
In saying all of that, is there anything else that a Partnership for National Unity can do? Because the argument out there that, look, it may not be a good thing that the President has done, but he hasn't broken any laws. So what next can your partnership do?
Well, he has broken the confidence that should exist between the people and the President. He has broken the sort of relationship that should exist between the opposition and the government. And he may not have broken the Constitution, but this is something that was, although we knew that this was coming, it was something that is completely unnecessary at this point in time. He has not exhausted dialogue. He has not explored the possibility of getting laws passed without confronting the National Assembly in this particular manner. So we feel it's quite unnecessary. The implications are, of course, the democracy has been smothered. I think that is the biggest problem that we have. And the thrust now will be to restore democracy, get Parliament working again, so that we can debate the issues that are before Parliament.
Sorry, if I can stay on this line for a bit and just give you an opportunity to defend your partnership's position. Since the President's announcement on Monday, the 10th of November, that the Parliament has been prorogued, we saw some sentiments coming from persons, including Mr. Shearer and, of course, Dr. Luncheon, where they're saying that your partnership is going out there, basically telling the public that what the government has done is unconstitutional and illegal. Could you defend your partnership in terms of what is it that you really want the public to understand?
We want the public to understand that we are not in a state of emergency. The situation has not arrived. We have not arrived at a situation in which you can say that this action by the President is necessary. And it is just a simple attempt, or you can say a simplistic attempt to avoid debating the no confidence motion. And it's an attempt to allow the prolongation of the campaign period, because it's quite clear to everyone that the PPP is campaigning, giving out these cash grants and laptops and other gifts to communities in the hinterland and elsewhere. It is quite clear that he does not want the senior ministers, particularly the Minister of Legal Affairs and the Minister of Finance, to have their conduct brought under scrutiny. It's obvious that they want to continue running Parliament, or running the government, not Parliament, running the government without the scrutiny of the National Assembly. So it's a big game. It is not, in fact, Mr. Shearer may be right in saying that there is no specific article of the Constitution which prohibits the president from doing what he did, but it's against the spirit of this nation. This nation looks to its presidency for inclusionary democracy, looks to its presidency for representation of their interests, and he's broken faith with the nation. That is a big problem.
This move has seen Guyana making the international news, sir. We saw it in various newspapers coming from Jamaica, and then it was also on the BBC that, look, Guyana is moving toward a dictatorship state because of this move by Mr. Donald Ramotar. Now, apart from the APNU supporters, do you see other sections of our nation coming out and saying that, look, this is wrong, and the president needs to end this period of a prorogued parliament?
Well, his action has inflamed opinion both inside of Guyana and outside of Guyana. Inside of Guyana, there are some choristers. I call them choristers because once the chorus starts, they tend to repeat the government line. But some persons, I think the Trade Union Congress and others have said, this is not a type of action that is going to help to promote dialogue. So some religious bodies have spoken out, trade unions, as I said, have spoken out, and individuals have spoken out. The letter columns are filled with criticism and condemnation of what the government has done. And the Catholic bishop has spoken out. And overseas, international organization has started to speak out. The OAS has spoken out. And we will be writing, along with the Alliance for Change, we'll be writing to CARICOM, other international bodies, to emphasize what has gone wrong in this country. This is a completely gratuitous act of malice against the citizens of this country. So I am confident that the public opinion, both inside and outside of Guyana, support a quick return to normal democracy and the removal of this prorogation so that we can get on with the business of Parliament.
Before we come, sir, to some other moves that your partnership and, of course, your party, the PNCR, would eventually take. Now, we see some citizens, one particular newscast carried a story where some citizens, strangely enough, there are about 6 persons who said, look, I just heard about the president proroguing the parliament. I don't understand what it is. I'm not really interested. How do you plan to keep citizens like that in the know? How does your partnership plan to continue having our citizens involved?
Well, normally through the media, through our press conferences, our newspaper, our television programs, by rallies, face-to-face contact. But more importantly, we already started an outreach program. As you may know, we started our local government campaign since October 2013. So we have been in the villages. I've done about 20 villages in the last 2 months. And we will be informing them about what is taking place. Truly enough, most of what we've discussed had to do with local government elections and preparing for the elections in other ways. But now, this has been a setback to the people, and we will inform them about the need to resist the PPP's encroachment on their liberties and the denial of the democracy that they should enjoy in the National Assembly. So those are the means, the conventional media, but also face-to-face contact and the rallies. We'll be out on the street there, informing the people about what needs to be done to restore this country's democracy.
As we talk some more about those rallies planned and picketing exercises, in the past, the PNC and APNU has been also involved, pulled into this. You've been accused, particularly by Mr. Clement Rohi, of putting people on the streets and starting some sort of violent, and we even had sentiments recently coming from the permanent secretary on his Facebook page, the permanent secretary for the Amerindian Affairs Ministry, that APNU is going to incite some sort of a violent phase in this period of a prorogued parliament. Your response?
Well, APNU has never been involved in violence. APNU was established a little over 3 years ago in 2011. And no one could say that we have promoted violence, we've advocated violence. And certainly, at this point in time, we are building a national coalition. We want to get all sectors of society in support of our cause. And violence will not help us. In fact, violence would help the PPP. And I have issued a statement on this matter, because it is clear that the police are preparing the riot squad. They've started training. I mean, there's no provocation, there's no justification whatsoever. So I am warning the Commissioner of Police, Mr. Silal Prasad, I'm warning the Chief of Staff of the GDF, Brigadier Mark Phillips, not to allow themselves to be drawn into any unlawful action by politicians who want to see chaos in the streets. APNU has been picketing the office of the president for over a month and a half for local government elections, and there's not been any disorder. And I don't think that there should be any disorder now. So I am confident that our supporters are law-abiding people, and we know that violence or any sort of disturbance of the peace will not be in our interest. And they have been so advised, they've been so informed. The only people interested in violence is the People's Progressive Party, because they'll be able to say, to use strong arm measures, and over the last 3 years they've demonstrated their capability of doing that in 2011, 2012. So we're not going to go that way. We've never gone that way, although we've been provoked into misbehavior. We've not misbehaved by the police and by the PPP.
Is there any sort of fear in your head that there could be a repeat of what happened in 2011, where some APNU protesters, peaceful protesters, were shot?
Well, that event, as you know, was the subject of a motion by me in the National Assembly. I called for a commission inquiry. Ramotar hasn't acceded to that request. He has never acceded to any requests of mine in any event. When APNU gets into office, we'll investigate it. But when you read the testimony, when you read the statements, when you read the newspaper reports, you can see that Rohi himself was appalled at the reaction of the police, and he met all of them in his office afterwards, trying to get to the bottom of that event. I don't believe there's going to be any event like that, and that is why I've taken the trouble beforehand to warn the public, to warn Silal Prasad, warn Mark Phillips, not to do anything unlawful. It is entirely within our rights. I think it's Article 147 of the Constitution. We have a right to assemble, and we will assemble, and nobody's going to prevent us from assembling. We are not going to break the law, but we are enraged at what Ramotar has done, and we will assemble to make our feelings known.
Brigadier, if I can move on to another aspect of this whole issue about the prorogation of Parliament. You've been quoted in sections of the media as saying during this prorogation period, you will not meet with President Donald Ramotar. And of course, he has been quoted as saying that he still plans to reach out to APNU and by extension, the entire opposition during this period. Your sentiments?
Well, he can reach all he wants, but we have been very accommodating to President Ramotar over the last 3 years. I do believe he's insincere. I do believe he's not serious about dialogue. He wants his way. He's not interested in negotiations. He's not interested in what the other side thinks. And it is quite clear to me that every single matter, every single item that ought to be discussed has been put on the table. And I am convinced that Mr. Ramotar knows exactly what he needs to do. Before this matter came up, the matter of the no confidence motion came up, he knew clearly what he ought to have done, and he has brought this on his own head. He has been dawdling instead of calling local government elections, giving all sorts of puerile, infantile excuses, and this is the consequence of his own misbehavior, his own misconduct.
Brigadier, as we have to prepare to wrap up, are you confident that your efforts, of course, you also talked about civil society, you talked about the church and various bodies speaking out against Mr. Donald Ramotar's recent move to prorogue the parliament. Are you confident that all of these efforts combined would force the president to call an early end to, put an early end to the fact that the parliament has been prorogued? And of course, we know that for the benefit of the viewers, the longest it can be is for 6 months. Do you believe and we can see an early end to it?
What I do believe is that the PPP has already determined when this prorogation will come to an end. It is my view that the PPP wants to complete their election campaign preparations and at the same time avoid scrutiny through the National Assembly. I do not believe that anything I can say or the diplomats or any other body can say or do will persuade the PPP to change from what they have decided. I don't know when it's going to be, but they are not going to end the prorogation until they're good and ready, and they're ready for elections, because they know that once they go back into the National Assembly, they will have to confront the no confidence motion. And both APNU and AFC are more determined than ever before that that will be at the top of the agenda. The PPP must go.
Final 30 seconds, sir, before we have to go. What, in terms of repeating, what would you want the population to understand most about APNU's and David Granger's position regarding the prorogation of Parliament?
The PPP must go. That's what I want them to understand. The PPP must go. They're bad news for Guyana.
Thank you very much, sir. Leader of the People's National Congress Reform and Leader of the Opposition, Brigadier the Honorable David Granger. This has been another edition of The Public Interest. I am Malika Ramsey. Thank you very much for joining us, and of course join us again next time.